Good. Thanks, everyone. Welcome to the May Elevate series. Today we have Megan Bone from HR Operations. I'm going to give us a deep dive and go into all the stuff that HR Ops does and how that impacts our business partners. So I will turn it over to Megan.
Thank you, Deanna. Yeah, Deanna asked me like in October if I wanted to do this, and I was like, yes. And then a week and a half ago, she's like, "Are y'all ready?" And I was like, "Yeah." What was it again? But I am very excited to be here, and I appreciate everybody else being here because I know as well as you do, we're at the end of an academic year. We have commencement season, then we have summer, all busy times for HR. There's really no busy time for HR. I just act like there is, but we're always busy. We're just always busy. So I appreciate you all taking your afternoon to be here. Um, I am gonna go ahead and share my screen because I just realized I wasn't doing that yet. So here we go. Okay. Um, I'm going to start off with by saying that I know some of you have attended other cohorts or things like that that have seen similar presentations. And I just want to say, bear with me. I try to add new things every time and look at new perspectives and take things from like a little bit of a deeper way of looking at it. And so hopefully, while some of this may seem familiar to some of you, hopefully there's going to be some new things in here as well. I did put in some more interactive elements too. So feel free to kind of engage in those. If you're a camera off doing things on the side type person, I totally respect that. And also that's totally fine also. But I think just kind of diving into these areas a little more will be helpful overall. And so hopefully it feels new to those of you that have been in this before. So first things first, I have some polls, and it has been like a hot minute since I've had to launch a poll, but I think I remember how. And I just wanted to get a little bit of information from all of you. So the first one is, how long have you worked in HR at CU? It could be any campus. Where'd y'all go? Watching it come in. Okay, slowing down a little bit. All right, okay, so you can see it here. All right, so we've got quite a mix, a good number in 1 to 3 years, but we have the full spectrum here. Now, in my mind, I was going to like add this all up and be like, collectively, we have this much experience, but then reality hit in, and I went to school in Florida and math is just not my thing. That's why I work in HR. So, but we have a good mix of people from a broad spectrum of experience here. And really, you could be here 10 years and learn something new. You can be new and know things we didn't know about. So it's just always good to have an understanding of where everybody is in their journey here. So the next poll, there's 3 to start, and then I promise it's not like 3 back to back. What is your favorite part about working in HR? Is it the people? Is it the processes? Yes, Lindsay, exactly. Is it the strategy? Is it something else? I had an employee once that told me, this is just a job for me. And I totally respect that also sometimes. Watching the numbers come in. We're almost there. All right. So we are like astronomically people. But HR, as we know, has all different parts to it. And that's why it's good to have different people that like the different components. Everybody on my team knows that I hate spreadsheets like with a passion, but I have somebody on my team that's great with spreadsheets. So it works out well that way. And then I just saw in the comments, like, right, I picked other because my favorite part is being able to extend an offer for someone to join our awesome community. I love that. That is a really fun part of the job too, sometimes is being able to bring other people in and do that piece. So thank you for sharing that. Did I share these results? Did I share them? I don't know if I did. Here they are. Ta-da! It was overwhelmingly working with people, but a good mix. Okay. The next one is the most important question, in my opinion. Are you a dog person, a cat person, a lover of all pets, or just not a pet person, which I also respect? Okay, come on, cat people. We can't let the dog people win. All right, let's see here. Okay, well, it's Colorado. I shouldn't be shocked. Dog, a little more dog people and lover of all pets than true cat people. But, I recognize where I live. I get it. So, okay. Thank you for that. I like to just kind of get a gauge of everybody. And now I like cats too. You can also like cats, but not be a cat person. That is fair. All right. So just a little bit about HR operations. I think many of you maybe have seen this slide before. This is kind of an overview of what we do. We sit at the central campus HR office. So you have campus level HR, then you have your college level HR, school medicine HR, and then you have everybody in the departments, right? And sometimes in departments, it can even be in layers, but like that's where I kind of sit at the campus level. And what HR operations does, in my vision, is we provide services, guidance, and stewardship of human resources functions throughout several stages of the employee life cycle. So that is things like background checks, employment eligibility, which is the form I-9 and E-Verify. It's kind of a broader overview of personnel records, employment verifications. We do the transactional support for temporary employments, working retirees. We partner with our friends in faculty affairs. We do some portion of the faculty job posting process, and they do the other portion. So there's a lot of pieces that we do. This is kind of the like bubble of all the things. There are things outside of this that are odds and ends that we do as well. For example, I review all the award programs for the campus except for school medicine. That's Wumi, right? So while she does it for you all, I do it for everybody else. We have a part of the honorarium process. Sometimes we're involved in leave transfer. So there is a lot of odds and end pieces we do too, but these are kind of the core of it. And my team is 8 people. So it's myself plus 8 people. So I guess that's 9. See, went to school in Florida. Can't do math. And just based off of the poll that I gave you all, here's a little look into those individuals. So many of you have worked with Lynn. She's been here approaching 4 years. She loves supporting people and she loves all pets. She has a motorcycle because yes, she does drive a motorcycle. Franny's our artist. She's been here approaching 6 years. She's also the one that likes spreadsheets, if you can't tell by her answer. I have several readers. Molly, if you are a Fourth Wing fan or an ACOTAR fan, you can definitely hit up Molly on that. And she's been here, she'll be approaching 2 years. Betsy approaching 3 years. She is everything craft. You can, like, if you can think it or find a picture of it, she can do it. I don't even know how. We have Rachel. Rachel's our I-9 person. She has her very large baby is a Great Dane named Doc. So if you ever want to talk about dogs with her, all you dog people, she will be happy to. Valerie's is approaching 4 years. She is our outdoors enthusiast. So she is always good to talk about that. Natalie's another reader. She's here approaching 3 years. And then Sylvia's our newest employee. She's our business operations specialist. She's actually worked, she was in, I want to say Department of Surgery. So she worked on campus longer, but she's been with HR approaching a year. Then you have myself. I'm obviously a cat person. If you know me, I have 4 cats. 3 of them are hairless. I also have 2 tween girls. So between the cats and the tweens, my self-esteem takes a daily hit. So just know that like I'm told I'm uncool by either a cat or a kid at least once a day. But I've been with CU for going on it's going to be going on 15 years, a little over 14 years, most with the Boulder campus, last almost 3 with the Anschutz campus. So this is the HR ops team in a quick slide. And then these are kind of the 3 areas that I have asked my team to focus on. So we really want to maintain HR best practices. We want to make sure we're delivering the best service we possibly can. And we do want to make sure we're minimizing misalignment with employment law and university policy. So that's the compliance side of it. Part of what we do has a compliance focus. So that's why we do that piece of it in particular. Okay. I assume there's no questions about HR ops, but if there is, feel free to throw them in the chat. We're going to dig into employment background checks. And what I've tried to do this time is I've tried to both show you, it's not going to be super process heavy. Process is obviously in there a little bit, but I'm trying to also in this particular presentation show you what happens once you submit that form, right? Like it goes off into this void and then you feel like you're waiting and you don't really know all the pieces that are happening. So trying to show what's really happening on our side and all of the considerations being made and all of the different nuances of background checks and also the why and the who and the what. So again, if you've seen this presentation, it does have some different pieces to it this time. And then, as everybody loves to do, we're going to look at a couple background checks and determine what you think we should do with the candidate based off of what we found in the background check. So the University of Colorado Anschutz Meadow Campus strives to maintain a safe and productive educational, clinical, research, and employment environment. This is our statement that goes into our job ad. So we do employment background checks. And apparently I have another poll question. So let me find that for you. Yes. Okay. So just out of curiosity, which federal law regulates background checks? Is it the National Security Act, the Privacy Act of 1974, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, or the Federal Information Security Modernization Act? I can tell some people have attended my presentations before, which I love. Okay. Slowing down a bit here. So we're going to just end it. All right, so a little bit of a mix here. It is actually the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Now, interestingly enough, the Federal Information Security Modernization Act has a little bit of a piece in it in that it has dictated what HireRight is using for its retention policies, but the Fair Credit Reporting Act is what background checks fall under, and I will talk more about that in just a minute. So to 27 of you, kudos. Okay. All right, so when it comes to background checks, this is kind of the overall picture of what we are considering. So we have this scale here, and on one side of the scale, we have you all in your departments, and you have a hiring need, and you probably have a search committee or a hiring manager, and that person really, 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 really wants this candidate or really has struggled to find the perfect person for this candidate or really has an urgency to get that position filled. And so we're trying to get them through these HR processes as quick as possible to fulfill that need, right? And that need is important and we want to fulfill that need. But on the other side of the scale, when it comes to background checks, we're looking at a couple of different things that we have to consider. So the first thing is our federal regulations. There are actually 2 federal laws that background checks fall under in reality, but the main one is the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So the Fair Credit Reporting Act comes into play because a background check is considered a consumer report, kind of like a credit check. And so under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, they will dictate what the employee is entitled to and what the employer has to provide, as well as kind of the certain pieces of the process that have requirements tied to them. So that's what the Fair Credit Reporting Act basically goes into. The other side of the spectrum of that is the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission. So they do also a joint publication with the Federal Trade Commission, which is where the Fair Credit Reporting Act falls under, that says that we must apply the same standards to everyone, regardless of, well, let me take a breath. Race, national origin, color, sex, religion, disability, age, genetic information. I think that's all of them. And so they also go on to say that special care should be taken when basing employment decisions on populations where it's more common to have background check problems because they're underserved populations. There's a lot of research in the criminology world about, how that happens, but basically we should be applying EEO standards to background checks as well, or to the candidates. So those are the federal regulations that we're looking at. Then we have to look at employer risk, right? We have vulnerable populations on our campus. Any college campus does, but we're a medical campus. So we have patients, we have minors, we have students. We've got a lot going on. And so we have to look at what risk does it pose, or what potential risk could it pose if we were to hire in somebody that has something in their background that could be a discrepancy. Then we have university policy. So we do have a university background check policy. We actually have a system level administrative policy statement for background checks. It's super intense. It just says every campus should come up with a background check policy. So that's what the system level policy says. And then we have our campus level background check policy. And that policy does things like it outlines the roles. It talks about what HR's role is in it and who's responsible for background checks. It talks about criteria. For candidates, it talks about the process. It talks about what is and isn't going to be eligible for employment. And so that's our campus policy that we follow. There are some exceptions to the campus policy. So the background check policy does say that HR is solely responsible for making these decisions, determining background checks, etc. Some of the exceptions which do not, well, I guess SOM does have an exception. So the main exception on campus is the police department. It is very common and traditional for police departments to manage their own background checks for their employees. So they manage all of that. The other exceptions when it comes to background checks that would impact SOM is that we know there are some populations that require background checks above and beyond what the university requires. So I'm thinking like behavioral health workers, right? I think they have to do fingerprinting. So some departments manage that side of it, but we manage the background checks that apply to everybody. And then the last piece here on the screen is fair chance hiring. So fair chance hiring has been around for some time, but it's gained momentum in the last several years. And this is that idea that everybody deserves a fair chance, and that there's statistics out there that say that previously incarcerated individuals are not always given that fair chance. So a lot of states and even some municipalities are passing laws that we have to follow for individuals who have resided in those states or when checking backgrounds in those states that fall under fair chance hiring. So Colorado has the Chance to Compete Act is one of them. The Chance to Compete Act in Colorado basically says several things, but one of the things that's outlined in there is time limits to which Colorado can release it's release criminal records, but really they call it sealing criminal records after a certain amount of time. But depending on the level of the criminal record and the also, sorry, I just got a new cat, and she doesn't understand Zoom protocol. So if you hear meowing, she's under the screen here. I apologize. But so it says things like if you've committed a civil I forget the right word, but something civil, or if you have a low-level misdemeanor, it might get sealed after 4 years, and then it wouldn't show up on a background check. So that luckily is all kind of filtered through HireRight, who does all of our processing, but we do have those laws in place. There's also the ban the box laws that you may have heard of, right? That you can't ask somebody if they have a criminal record on their application. Other examples is California. Shocking, right? California has some crazy laws when it comes to this. They have a law that requires the redaction of an individual's full date of birth from public records, including courthouse records. And so what can happen sometimes is if we're running in California for an employee, they may not be able to verify if that person has a record or not, because they can't use the date of birth as a marker to determine, like, if it's a common name, it's the right person. So lots of different things popping up all over the place, but that all falls under the fair chance hiring piece. And luckily, like I said, HireRight manages a lot of that. So here's the who, when, and what. So who gets a background check? Anybody employed by the university, including student employees, that is new or has not been employed by the university for more than a year will get a background check. However, there are individuals that can't get a background check, as some of you have encountered. So the first one is minors. As I mentioned, the background checks are considered consumer reports. They piggyback off of the credit reporting system. When you are under the age of 18, you are not even remotely on that radar yet, or you shouldn't be, unless there's like an identity theft thing going on. So we actually cannot run background checks on minors. If we accidentally run a background check on a minor, it's just going to basically error out and say no record found. Same thing with international employees. At this time, we do not run international background checks. It is something we're looking into, but at this time, we do not. And so, in order to have a background check ran in the US, you had to have lived in the US for at least a year in the last 7 years and have a social security number. Because our internationals coming in don't have that, if we try to run it again, it's basically going to error out and say no record found or not produce anything. So what we've decided with legal's blessing is that, the vetting that happens to get the visa is adequate for the first year. And it's really adequate in general because they do go through heavy vetting and background checking for the visa process. But after the first year, we are rerunning those. And part of that's just to alleviate another policy on campus, because this is happening more and more, where our minors on campus policy says that you cannot work with minors unless you've had a background check. So we've actually had cases with internationals that within their first year, before we can run the check, they're not allowed to work with minors. And so really just getting that 1 year mark helps keep everything within compliance and with the policy, and make sure that then they can work with any of the populations they need on our campus. So those are the two exceptions. Internationals and minors have those nuances. In addition, we have the volunteer policy, and the volunteer policy says, and the reason it's on here is because it actually still comes through HR, that anyone who will have direct ongoing contact with students, patients, or visitors, or will have direct access to university resources such as facilities, equipment, funds, or property also need to be background checked through HR. So that can be volunteers. It could also be unpaid interns. It can also be independent contractors if that independent contractor is not employed by another company that does it for them. So we get that question a lot, but pretty much that's the threshold. If they're not an employee, that would require them that direct ongoing contact. If somebody's coming for one day to like tour something and they're going to be escorted the whole time, that's a judgment call on your part, because more likely than not, it's not direct and ongoing. But if they're going to be coming and going, working with people, regardless of whether because I had somebody the other day say, well, this is going to be a remote person. If they're remote, but they're using our Zoom and they're contacting our people on our behalf, or they're contacting people on our behalf, they still probably should be having a background check. So those are kind of the who. The when. The Fair Credit Reporting, good Lord, that's tongue-tied. Fair Credit Reporting Act says that the finalist is the one that can be background checked. So we have defined that as once you've extended the verbal offer and they've accepted, you can go ahead and run it. Now, what I have found recently is that it's a little different with targeted hires. So with targeted hires, if you know that you're hiring the person and you have the posting up, if that person that you know you're targeting and going to be hiring applies, you could go ahead and submit the background check there too, because they're the finalist, right? So like really use your judgment on whether it should be an offer versus a application, but it's really whoever you define as the finalist. We cannot run background checks on all candidates just in case. I've gotten that question before. It has to be whoever you're considering to seriously hire for the position. Other questions we've gotten with when is if a current employee applies for a position and there's a check on file that's more than 12 months old, we could, if the receiving department, so as a transfer, could decide if they want to rerun the background check or not. That's really up to the department that's receiving the person if they want to do a new check or not. If it's less than 12 months old, then you probably don't need to do it. If a former employee has a break in service of more than 12 months, then we should run it. We also have some cases, we are trying to fix this through the background check audit we started working on, but we do have some cases where people didn't have all of the checks. And so if we see that a check is missing, we may tell you that they need one. And then there are some cases where an employee gets promoted maybe to a higher level and has different responsibilities that would trigger a new check. So sometimes that happens as well. But you can always reach out to our team and we will tell you if somebody needs to have a background check or not. And then what do people get? So the list up here on the screen is the kind of standard of what everybody gets. And then the last one is just position dependent. So everybody gets a name-based criminal history check. Everybody is checked on the excluded parties or exclusion list for campus. So every CUPD keeps a list of individuals that are excluded from CU campuses. And we get an update of that list whenever somebody new is added. And we do check our new hires to make sure they're not on the list. Now, you would think if they've been excluded from campus, they won't come to try to work here. people. They're just people are people, right? So we do have to check that every time. There is everybody gets checked through what's called the restricted party screening through Descartes visual compliance. This actually happens upon hire with our team, but then every employee of our campus actually gets checked every month on this. This is a system that names get ran through to look at things like the FBI watch list, debarment lists, Medicaid fraud lists. There's like hundreds of lists on there. It's all at the federal level. And my understanding is that not only do employees get checked every month and new hires get checked, but also our vendors through the PSC get checked on this. And I think if I really understand it all, I think it, like in the simplest term, it's tied to grants. It's a grant, federal grant and contract requirement, but that happens for every individual. And that's something we have to do manually. And then everybody gets a national sex offender registry check. If they are driving for the job, we will check a motor vehicle. And driving can be a vehicle or transporting patients. It could be driving a university vehicle, transporting patients, or driving a golf cart. If they're an officer, they get a financial check. And then if you are, which probably wouldn't impact school medicine, but financial aid employees that have direct access to federal income tax information have to be fingerprinted now. So we do that as well in our office. Oops, sorry. Oh my God, what's happening? I went too far. Okay. So that's the who, when, and what of it. Here's a bit of the process, and we're gonna kind of bounce back and forth because I want to dig into some of these with all of you. So the first part of the process is you submit the form. And as you know, this is what the form looks like, right? So a couple of things I want to point out on here that are just things that we are now encountering more and more. And when I say we are encountering, it doesn't mean it's just school of medicine. We still support the Denver campus and the Anschutz campus. So there's more beyond just the school of medicine. So the first thing I want to highlight here is that we need the applicant's legal name as it appears on the Social Security card. We do not want to disrespect anybody's preferred name. We do not want to disrespect anybody's dead name in a sense that we're requiring them to use it. But we are legally required to check the legal name as it appears on the Social Security number. And so that part is important there. We actually just had a case on the Denver campus where we were trying to sort out in one place in HCM, her name's Laurel or Lauren. In one place it's Laurel. And then on the Social Security card, it's Laura. Like, we need the legal name. So that's an important part. And I get they're not always telling you that, but it is one of the reasons why we end up with discrepancies is trying to figure out why the legal name that's put in the system doesn't match the Social Security number. The applicant's email. This is another really important part of this. We take that email and that's what we put into the hire rate system. Our only other way to get that email is going to be to go into the ATS, into Taleo. And we know that sometimes people apply with one email and then through the process, they give you a new email. So we use the email that you put into the system, and we have seen a lot of delays when that email is not keyed in correctly. So that's another thing to pay close attention to because there's a part of the process that can't move on until the employee receives their email. This I just want to point out because it's like once you click Anschutz, this applicant status pops up. And sometimes when it comes to volunteers, it can confuse people. So we do still have Denver and Anschutz on here because we support both campuses. And so when the applicant status pops up, this is where you could pick like staff or faculty, but this is also where you can select volunteer if you're doing it on behalf of for volunteers or somebody that's unpaid. And then just the last piece I want to point out on the form is the supervisor's name and email and the business partner's name and email. Whatever you put in here, we have some automatic message. This is set to go out to these individuals. So if you put your name twice, it just means it's going only to you and not to the supervisor. So just kind of know. And the only reason I bring this up is we have seen where people will put the employee's name in here and then the employee's getting the supervisor email, which is different than the employee email, and it confuses them. So just be sure you kind of know what you're putting in where. So this is the form. You submit it, it goes off into the ether, but really it comes to my team. Then from there, once the email is submitted and it triggers some emails out, these next three steps are kind of happening behind the scenes. So the first is that we verify what checks are needed. We make sure that they don't have a valid check on file so that we're not rerunning the check on somebody. Again, this is consumer reports. Somebody cannot run a credit check on you for no reason. We cannot run a background check on somebody for no reason. And so we need to make sure that there is a valid reason that we're running it. We also look to make sure, we also perform the manual checks at this point. So we're doing that discard thing. We're looking at the excluded parties list, all of that. Then we put it into HireRight and it triggers the email to the candidate. And this is a key because the process cannot move on unless the candidate completes this email. And that's because the Fair Credit Reporting Act says that the candidate has to receive certain disclosures and they have to approve those disclosures or sign off to be able to have an employment background check ran. And until they do this email part, put in their information, self-report anything they need to self-report and agree to those disclosures, the check cannot move on. So I will say that a lot of our delays happen in this stage. But this is a key part of the process. And it's why also we get asked sometimes, like, can I just fill out the background check for them? We had, if you've been in my trainings, I've told the story before, we had like a band manager because it happened. One of the new employees was in a band and the band manager was like, well, I need to complete the background check for them. And I'm like, that's not how it works. And so this is why the employee has to do this part. And then HireRight runs the background check. And I want to explain to you, we're going to kind of change screens here a little bit, what that looks like. And I'm sorry, I actually screenshot this off of a HireRight presentation, so it's not super clear, but what you're looking at here is for our entire university. So for all of CU, this is everywhere a background check was ran or checked, a county that was checked in 2024 for our campus, and then how long it took in those counties. And so the way that our background checks work is we do a name-based Social Security check, I guess, criminal check. What that means is whatever names the candidate puts in. So they put in their legal name as well as what they call aliases. And aliases can be things like, my name is Megan Lucy Bone. So my legal name could be Megan Lucy Bone, but then an alias might be Megan Bone, or it might be Megan L Bone, or it might just be Megan Lucy, because at some point I applied for something that just used that. So it's more like name variations, or a maiden name could be an alias, or they could have robbed banks under a different name and that's their alias. Like there's various reasons why people may have aliases. But when the candidate puts in their legal name and then they put in their other names, it checks those. It also takes the social security number and it looks for up to 2 additional aliases that match that social security number. And then it's going to look at everywhere that the candidate says that they have resided in the last 7 years, and it's going to pull addresses based off of the social security number in the last 7 years. So it's going to take all of that. And then the background checks actually happen in the counties where the individual resided in the last 7 years, except in Colorado. If they resided in Colorado, it checks all of Colorado. But like if they lived in Alachua County, Florida, then it's only going to check Alachua County, Florida. But then if they lived in Broomfield County, Colorado, it's going to check all of Colorado. But that's how it works. It's also why there's sometimes big variations in how long it takes to get a background check, because it depends on the sophistication of that county's systems. If it's all electronic and it's just a simple pull the records and get it to HireRight, it's going to come quick. If they're still using paper records, it's going to take longer. The other problem we're running into right now, more and more, is if that county is subject to some sort of major cybersecurity attack and has had to either shut down their systems or restrict access to their systems, it's going to delay things. In those cases, there was a big one in Kansas City last year or this year, I can't remember. In those cases, HireRight usually tells us, and then we will work with you to talk about what the options are, because we may not be able to get that back pretty quick. But that's how the actual like criminal background check piece runs. And again, you can see we've checked pretty much every state, and some areas a lot more concentrated, because if people moved around or if they're working out of state, they may live in other counties. And so it's really just, I thought it was interesting to see it all. And then you can see like the turnaround time. Some places are going to take more than 5 days. They probably have less sophisticated systems. Some of them took less than a day. It just varies. Okay, so then the results come to us. And this is the part where I want to show you what we see, because I've gotten the question of like, can we just have access to see when they come back? Or can we have a dashboard that shows us when a background check is ready? And it's not that simple on our end is what we're seeing. We don't get like a pass fail. We have to actually go in and look at what came back and assess what we need to do with it. So once Higher Rate returns the results, we log in, and keep in mind, this screen actually has a lot more information. I tried to take out anything that's personally identifiable for confidentiality reasons. So there would be like the name and address, all of that stuff would be listed in here. But we see a list on our end that tells us whether a background check has come back, who it's come back for, and whether they have a discrepancy or no discrepancy. So if we see no discrepancy, when we open that up, we're seeing all green checks, and all green checks tell us that they didn't self-report anything, that no court records are found, that their social security number matched their name, and that they're not in this National Sex Offender Registry. This is a pass. So when we see this, we know we can go ahead and send the pass letter. When we see discrepancy, it can mean a couple of different things. So in this case, you'll see there's a red flag because they self-reported something and a court record was found. So now we know we have to go into the report and look at that and figure out what the next steps are. We also see a lot of flags on the social security number when the name doesn't match the social security number. And so it could be that there's just a gazillion people with that name, and for whatever reason, it didn't find it right. It could be a California thing. I don't know. Sometimes we have everything right and it just doesn't match and we still pass it. But sometimes there really is a disconnect. We had one on recently where it literally brought up a completely different name, like not even a preferred name, a completely different name. And the person's response was, I don't know why this keeps happening. And we're like, you should look into that. So we have to kind of follow up. And that's why you may hear from us sometimes things um, like, can you double check that you put this person's social security number in right, or can you verify for them? If we have an I-9 at this point, we will also just go check the documents in the I-9 if we can, because sometimes it's just as easy for us to do that. But in this case, we would see this and know that they have something on their record that needs further review. And that brings me into our exercise. And we're calling this a tale of two kidnappings. So these are real background checks. I have redacted a lot of information because, again, the confidentiality piece, but they are of two different candidates that both have kidnapping convictions in their past. And so I want to go through them with you all so you understand a little bit of what we see and then see what you all think. And I'll talk through how we got to where we got with the results on these. So first the initial pre-adverse process. So a little bit of background information. So the pre-adverse process is pretty long. Pre-adverse process is when we think there may be an adverse employment action that comes in the result of not allowing that person to take that position. So we deny their eligibility to be able to take the job. Or rescind the offer. And so in that case, we start what's called a pre-adverse process. In that process, the FCRA says there's certain steps we have to take. The first thing we have to do if we decide to initiate that process is we have to notify the candidate of what we found. We have to provide them your rights under the FCRA document, and we have to provide them 5 business days to provide a written response to what was found. And we give them some guidance of the things we're looking for. They then send the response back. Sometimes they do it quick. Sometimes it takes a few days. Sometimes 5 days comes and goes and they never sent us anything. If you've been in that case, we will reach out to you and say, do you want to give them more time? We cannot move forward in the process until we receive that candidate's response because we're legally required to do so under the FCRA. Then once we receive the response back, we take either the job description or our knowledge of what the job is. We take the background check report, we take the candidate's response and any other information we have, and we perform what's called a relevancy and recency review. So just some statistics here at the top on why this is important. The number of Americans with criminal records is about the same as the number of Americans with a 4-year degree. And I believe this because we see a lot. Now, I can't give you numbers because we do not track every single person that comes back with discrepancies because quite frankly, it's a lot. We only track the ones that go through a pre-adverse process and whether we offered employment or not at the end of it. So it's a bit of a misleading number if I were to give it to you, but we do see a lot. Life is hard. life is hard. People go through different seasons. They learn, they grow, but sometimes they make mistakes. And so, yeah, people have a past, and it's not up to us to, judge that. It's just we have to go through this process. Approximately 95% of incarcerated individuals are eventually released back into the community, but having a record reduces the likelihood of a job callback by as much as 50%. So there is a lot of bias in the process when it comes to being an incarcerated individual. And so our job is to try to prevent unintentional discrimination against candidates with a criminal record by doing what we call a nature, relevancy, and recency review. So what we're looking at when we see things is we're looking at what is the job they're being hired into, what's the nature of work, what populations are they working with? How long ago did the conviction take place? Now we go back 7 years, but if the conviction was longer than 7 years and they self-disclosed it, then we can use it. Or the conviction can be longer than 7 years, but if the sentencing falls within the 7 years, it will show up in our report. And so we look at how long ago it was. We look at if there's a pattern of poor decision making or convictions. So for example, DUIs. If somebody has a DUI and they're not driving for the job or transporting patients or passengers on behalf of the university, then they pass. It's not relevant to the work they're performing. But if somebody were to have multiple DUIs and maybe some public intoxication charges, now we're talking about a pattern of poor decision making. And so we look at that as well. We also look if they self-disclosed it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Now we don't like look at that as a hard yes or no, because sometimes it's just they don't realize it was an actual conviction, or they thought it was a conviction, so they self-disclosed it and it was really like a ticket. Sometimes they just don't remember all of the details of it. And so we do look at self-disclosure, but that's not a make or break necessarily. And then the other thing that we do have to be mindful of is that we can only look at, for employment purposes, we can only look at convictions. However, we do see people with pending charges and warrants. When that happens, we ask that they resolve that before they begin work. So we don't deny employment, but we do say, we need you to go ahead and try to take care of that. If it's a warrant, we have actually had somebody show up to take care of the warrant and get arrested on the spot. And then we've also had them not even realize they have a warrant because it was like they didn't mow their lawn in Texas and got a bench warrant because of a ticket. And so like, it's just very varied. And so we just ask people to take care of it. Then we'll rerun the background check. If it's pending charges, same thing, take care of it, give us an update, and then we'll decide how to move forward. But we can't preclude employment because of those things. We can just ask that they resolve it before they start. Okay. So here we go. Candidate A, this person was applying to be a student assistant. And this is a little bit of what the report looks like. There's a lot more on here, but again, I've pieced a lot out and redacted some things for confidentiality reasons. So we can see right now they are not in the sex offender registry. That is good. We are happy when we see that. So you can see here, this is what they sell. Oh, wait, I'm pointing on my screen. You can't see my screen. They're on not on the sex offender sheet. You can see here that they self-reported that they have attempted kidnapping charges, that they pled guilty to a class 5 felony for attempted kidnapping in Broomfield, Colorado. So that's what they self-disclosed. They don't have to provide a lot of information at this point, and they didn't. What I've redacted here are dates, and that's just because Google's so easy nowadays. I didn't want somebody Googling the dates and the charges, just trying to keep that confidentiality. So these are just dates of when these things occurred. You can see here that this person lived in San Diego. There was no court records found in San Diego, but in Jefferson County, Colorado, there was. So again, the date's been redacted. Whoop, too far. Okay. So here is the actual charges that came up on their reports. They have a class 5 felony, kidnapping, second degree, seize, carry, victim attempt. So that's essentially attempted kidnapping. They were dispositioned as guilty. They received fines, restitution, court costs in the amount of $9,108. They have fully paid it, and they went on probation for 3 years. Then we look at their MVR report, because this person was going to be driving for the job. I think it was a golf cart situation. Their MVR report, they have a valid motorcycle driver's license, but they had all of these discrepancies on it. So several defective vehicles, speeding over the speed limit, missing headlamps, and they had an accident. Now, the thing I'll say about an MVR report is that for the jobs that I know that in certain parts of campus, like facilities is a great example. If somebody's MVR makes it too much of a risk to let them drive a vehicle, they'll still hire the person. They might just not be able to drive a golf cart, if that makes sense. In other parts, like say in SOM, I know we have some peer support people that will drive patients around to things and stuff. That would be a much different situation if we feel like that's not safe for them to drive and they need to transport patients. So there's a little flexibility when it comes to the MVR report. Okay, and then this was the candidate's response. Now, I just summarized it. This candidate's response actually was about 3 pages long and included like a lot of information and a lot of frustration of the situation, but I pulled out what I thought could be useful information. So they told us in their response that they have a class 5 felony for kidnapping in the 2nd degree, but they were originally charged with 2nd degree kidnapping, sexual assault of a child, and enticement of a child. They said that they met the person at the park while they were walking their dog. And through casual conversation at the park, she started asking me questions about my age and if I was in a relationship. Upon questioning her age, she told me she was 32, which I questioned. There's a condition called pituitary dwarfism. Now, I didn't put the whole paragraph in there, but he goes on to explain why he thought this really small, young looking person was 32 years old. She wanted to hang out. I transported us to a hike, as she stated her truck was no longer in her truck was in disrepair, so I brought her to the park. Upon returning to the vehicle, I brought her back and she left my house. Several weeks later, I was arrested and held based off of false accusations. Now, I will say that a lot of the rest of it was being frustrated that not actually about the kidnapping part, but about the fact that she said she was 32. So that was the candidate's response that we received. Again, that was candidate A. Now we're going to go through candidate B, and I'll refresh you on candidate A when we get to the end. So candidate B was applying for a data professional. That's actually not the title, but I changed it so that, again, confidentiality. So again, they are not in the National Sex Offender Registry, which is good. They self-reported. They have aggravated robbery, kidnapping, and burglary. That was a year. At the age of 19, I committed 2 armed robberies at a Blockbuster and Hollywood Video within a 2-hour period. I take full responsibility for the harm I caused. I was subsequently convicted and sentenced to 98 years in Colorado Department of Corrections. After serving 24 and a half years, the word is released there. That got redacted out, but there was some other stuff. And then these are the actual charges. So you can see they have 1 count, 2nd degree robbery, kidnap, 2nd degree robbery. So just to kind of clarify what the difference is in the first candidate A, they transported an individual from one place to the other. In this case, they actually, this is, Blockbuster Hollywood Video back in the day when people paid with cash, they actually just pushed the employees back into the office. And so that is where that kidnapping piece came into. So they have 3 counts of that. They also have 3 counts of a class 3 felony aggravated robbery intent to kill. So that's the other 3. So there were 3 employees involved in this whole situation. And then this is part of their response. Again, their response was very long as well. In April of 2000, I committed 2 aggravated robberies in a 24-hour period. I was arrested, charged, and ultimately sentenced. At the time, I was a young man, made a terrible impulsive decision. I did not grasp the impact of my actions on the victims, my own family, community, etc. I've spent years working to understand the harm I caused, take responsibility, and actively put in the hard work to understand how my choices, etc. Some examples of opportunities I've done include, working with restorative justice circles, helping build family reunification programs, collaborating on plays, podcasts, and community building projects in prison. And then since they've been released, working with a nonprofit that works with individuals in incarceration. So that was the core of their response. Okay, so we have 2 candidates. We have the first candidate that has the park situation, and we have the second candidate that has the robbery situation. And so I am curious what you all think, and now I got to find my buttons again here, of whether who should be eligible for employment. So who should be able to take the position they have? And candidate A only, candidate B only, candidate A and B, or neither should be eligible. And there's no judgment here. Like seriously, whatever you think, because I get you're also working with partial information. Do we know what they applied for? So candidate A applied for a student assistant. Candidate B, it was a data coordinator, data professional. I do not believe either was directly working in programs with minors also. Okay. All right, so here we go. We've got some candidate A's only, we have some candidate B's, we have candidate A and B, and we have neither. So kind of a good mix here. So I'm going to actually go back because I don't think I made a slide to tell you. So here. So we're going to go back. Candidate A. One thing that I think throws everybody off when they see student assistant is that in your mind, you're thinking like a 20-something-year-old person. Not that age matters, but just know that this was a very non-traditional age student in this situation. The other thing is that if you looked at their response, there were some inconsistencies as well, right? Like I took them on a hike, but then when we got to the park, but then I brought her back and she left my house, right? And so there's just some like inconsistencies here, and I get you don't have all of it. The inconsistencies travel through the whole response. Ultimately, what was decided is that candidate A was not going to be eligible for employment in this case because of the actual charges or the actual conviction, and because of the response that we got did not actually really show that they understood what was kind of wrong with the actions that they took. It was really a lot of ranting, which again, I recognize you didn't have this ranting, like, yes, I kidnapped her, but she didn't, but I thought she was 32. So when we looked at this, we decided, you know what, this person isn't going to be eligible for working. Now, this was also a student assistant, and I believe this was in an area where there was some concern that if it were to be like known, there would be some discomfort for the people working with this person. And so there was a lot of factors that went into it, but ultimately candidate A was not eligible. However, candidate B was eligible and was hired. The reason being, and again, you didn't have all of the information, is because the data professional job specifically was collecting data and information for a grant that's doing research on incarcerated individuals. And they needed somebody who had previous incarceration experience, or somebody um, who has worked with incarcerated individuals to be able to perform that work. And so from a relevancy standpoint, their background actually was very relevant. They also served out their sentence as they should have. They've done their restitution. There was no reason why, based off of their response and all the other moving factors, that we felt like this person posed an additional risk to the university. So that's why, and hopefully, I know again, it's a little hard because you don't have all the information, but that's why background checks can get a little complicated, because we can't assume just based off of what we see that somebody is or isn't eligible. Now, there are some charges that definitely make you not eligible for employment here. We have had individuals on the sex offender registry. And in both of those cases, with where they had applied, in particular, they were not eligible for employment based off of being on the sex offender registry. Our policy does say that if you have felonies for violent crimes or sex-based crimes, you would not be eligible. It also says if you have drug felonies in the last 7 years, you're not eligible. So that is one thing that we do take very seriously, is violent crimes and sex-based crimes. And then something we see common that we take seriously, but from a respect that we really try to make sure we understand the full situation before we make any decisions on it, is when we see anything domestic violence related or anything related to a violation of a protection order. So those are other areas where we look pretty deeply into it. And, it's really sad because this is where we don't necessarily want to get biases created at the department level, but we have seen cases where somebody has, certain charges, but it was tied to like a really nasty divorce situation. Or we've seen it where we actually did have a sex-based crime where it was a really sad situation where they genuinely thought they were dating somebody on a dating app. And it turns out the girl was only 15. And her mom found out that she was seeing multiple men through a dating app. And so, yes, they got charges and all those things, but it was based off of the whole situation. It felt like it was appropriate to allow to continue employment. And when I say we, I mean, again, Denver and Anschutz campus. So it doesn't necessarily mean they're working in the school of medicine. So questions on background checks. I'm seeing like, let's see. Oh, I missed a whole bunch. Let's see, questions. I think my team got some of these. Do your tweens dance? I swear I saw you at a dance competition recently. You did see me at a dance competition. Sorry I missed that question, but you did see me there. Yes, I am a self-proclaimed world's okayest dance mom. Like, don't have me do fancy hair, and please God, don't make me sequence anything. But yes, you did see me at a dance competition. Let's see. It looks like I think Natalie and Rachel got most of the questions. Are there any outstanding ones I need to talk about? Oh, here we go. Jean, you asked a great question. If HireRight only checks counties where the individuals actually resided, would it be easy to miss arrests, et cetera, if it happened in a different county and state where they don't reside? Yeah. So if anybody wants to go rob a bank, just make sure you don't rob it where you live. Yes. However, the risk is statistically speaking, the risk is low. Most people commit crime in the areas where they reside, but yes, that is possible. We're actually working with HireRight right now to look at the full scope of services that they provide. HireRight's tricky because they're actually system contracts. And so, but our campus has a lot of unique needs. And so we are trying to look at how we expand beyond just the current model. A lot of it is price too. Background checks can be expensive. I already have a massive budget on them. And so the more places we check, the more expensive they get. So what we are checking is what is the standard in the industry right now. But you're correct. Somebody that's super savvy really could commit a crime somewhere else and then us not catch it. Yep, we put the dates in HCM for you. So that's a good question as well. Any other questions on background checks? Okay, that hour went super fast. So I'm thinking let's take like a 5-minute break. Is that good with everybody? And come back at like we'll do 2:05. So like an 8-minute break. Cool. Who's going to take you through some of the more nuanced stuff. But this is pretty relevant given our recent I-9 audit. I will say that we are already seeing a significant number of them get done. So we very much appreciate the work that you all are doing to get these in place. We know it kind of probably threw you for a loop too, many of you, because my understanding is a lot of you, this happened from previous people you took over with. So we do appreciate everything you're doing, but we want to give you a little more insights into the world of I-9s as well. So why I-9s? And this may be a refresher for some of you, and that's great. It may be new to some of you, but this actually comes from the Immigration Reform and Control Act. I call it IRCA. I don't know if that's the actual acronym. But this went into place back in the 80s. And at the time, it did a couple of things. So it legalized most illegal immigrants. And again, these are all their terms, the UCIS terms, not my terms, but it legalized most illegal immigrants who had arrived in the country before January 1st, 1984. So IRCA created a path of citizenship for those individuals. It also made it illegal for employers to hire, recruit, or refer unauthorized aliens for work. It required employers to verify the identity and employment eligibility of all employees, and then it increased the enforcement by Border Patrol, Immigration and Naturalization Services, and other federal agencies, and then it expanded the guest worker visa program. So when the Immigration Reform and Control Act went into place, those are the things that it did. So for us, what it tells us is that we have to verify the identity and employment eligibility for each person that we hire. We have to do that within the first 3 business days. That is their rule. We have to complete and retain a Form I-9. I-9s have to be retained 3 years post start date and 1 year post termination. So if that 1 year post termination is within that 3 years, then we have to wait the 3 years, if that makes sense. And then we also have to refrain against discriminating against individuals based on their national origin or citizenship. So those are kind of the pieces of IRCA that apply to us. We also are an E-Verify employer. I feel like I've said this recently somewhere, so if I'm repeating myself to you all, I apologize. But the reason the university became an E-Verify employer was because it does a couple of things. It allows us to employ STEM OPT and to offer STEM OPT. So that is optional practical training for individuals on an F1 visa. It allows them to stay in the US for up to, it's 12 or 3 years. And I've seen it be, or not 12 or 3 years, 1 year or 3 years, but I've seen them mostly do 1 year and then extend to 3 years. But basically it allows them to stay in the US without having to try to get an H-1B visa to get that actual practical training in a STEM field. The other thing that E-Verify does is there's something called the FAR E-Verify clause. It's the Federal Acquisition Regulation rule, and it requires that all federal contractors use E-Verify to electronically verify the eligibility of their employment or their employees. And so some of you have come to us and said, we are getting this new contract and it has a FAR E-Verify clause. Can you verify that everybody's had this? And we'll have to go back and check for you. And so those are the two things it's tied to in particular on why we participate in E-Verify as a university. And because CU is a single employer, really all of this stuff pertains to CU as a whole, not just our campus. Okay. So who must complete the Form I-9? I know y'all have heard me say this. Any person, regular or temporary, to perform labor or services in the US in return for wages or other remuneration. Remuneration is anything of value. So if we're giving them anything, gift cards, food, housing, stipends, anything, and they're performing or expected to perform work for us, they need to have an I-9 on file. Stipends can be tricky. They don't always come with work attached to them. So those we say check with us on. But that who have to complete an I-9. Anybody who's receiving money in exchange for something of value. And why is this important? This is important because of I-9 compliance. So we know that there are I-9 audits. We actually, if you've kept up in the news, 3 custodial companies in Denver just got hit with $8 million in penalties from I-9 audits. And so that was, you can Google it. It was in the news recently. We did find out that it is not who CU contracts with. Our company that we contract with for custodial services did not fall victim to extreme penalties. So they have pretty good employment practices, and we were really happy to see that, but others were not so lucky. Penalties from failing to comply with I-9 requirements can range from civil fines to potential criminal prosecution. Now, I can tell you it's mostly we're talking about penalties here. Prosecution would be like continuously knowing, employing, and lying about unauthorized individuals, right? Fines can range from $281 to $2,789 per violation. That's this year's amount. Knowingly hiring or continuing to employ unauthorized individuals can range from $698 to $27,894 per worker. The custodial companies were employing quite a few unauthorized individuals. That's why the fines were so high. And the more times it happens with a company, the fines go up. And so that's why it can get really expensive. Non-compliance with I-9 regulations also can lead to the loss of government contracts and grants, and that would be a big problem for us as well. And so when we talk about the fines for penalties, what we're talking about is what are called either technical or substantive violations. So a technical violation would be something like it forgot to be signed, which isn't as big of a problem because we have higher rate, but like maybe a date is wrong or the name isn't in the right place or something like that. A substantive violation is not having an I-9 on file, not having it done within 3 days, etc. When an employer has an audit, we will have 10 days to fix any technical violations, which should be minimal for us because you all wouldn't make mistakes. And then we have Rachel, who checks all of the I-9s and corrects and works with you to make sure that we're not making mistakes. But we can't actually fix substantive errors. I mean, we have to fix them, but we don't, it doesn't maybe change the penalty we might get. And so we just have to look like we just have to look at it as, if they take into account that we're making a good faith effort to correct it, then we may have less penalties. So this is why it is important that we are on track with our I-9s, because there's money involved. And I don't know about you all, but I do not want to go tell my bosses that we have hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines for some paperwork errors. So there are 3 parts to the I-9, as you hopefully know. There's section 1, which is the employee information and attestation. They can complete that anytime before hire, but not before a job offer is extended. There's section 2. I cannot say this enough. It has to be done, and it has to be done within the first 3 business days. And the beautiful thing about the world we live in now, and if you were here just a couple years ago, you know it was like a roller coaster. But as it is right now, we have Zoom as a tool. So if somebody can't get to campus within their first 3 days, you can hop on Zoom and do it that way. But we should be getting these done within the first 3 days from their start date. And then section 3 is for re-verification and rehire. So there are cases where we should not be sending back to correct the I-9. You should be doing section 3. That would be for legal name changes, international renewals, or rehires. That should be done in section 3. Okay. Trivia time. I feel like music should play. Deanna, you have to sing every time I say trivia time, okay? No? Not doing it? All right.
Not today, friend.
Okay, got it. All right, which of the following do you think are the most common errors that we see for I-9s? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We're slowing down. Okay, here we go. You were all, I'm going to say you were all correct. Yes, you probably clicked the first one. I didn't realize the last one said all of the above. It's all of the above. So before I hand it off to Rachel, I'm just going to go through this, but she's going to go through international errors. I'm just going to go through the common ones for this. So not completing by the 3rd business day. If you walk away with anything from this presentation, please remember 3rd business day. Let's see. What's the next one? Initiating an e-verify check. Somehow people are able to initiate e-verify sometimes without actually doing the I-9. When you hit submit on the I-9, it automatically runs through e-verify. So you don't have to initiate it separately. Duplicates. If it is somebody who may have worked here before, you can always search them up or ask us, but duplicates are another error that we see a lot. Not the employee not necessarily notifying, or us not getting notified of a legal name change, because when the name change is part of our name change process is to notify the I-9 office. This goes to internationals, but Rachel's going to talk more about it. No expiration date after selecting a non-citizen authorized to work until. I gotta pause here a minute. Y'all know the world has been crazy, right? I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. So one of the many, like, I don't know, Franny, you can shake your head yes or no. I don't remember if it was an executive order or if it was just put out there, but like all of this work was done previously to take out illegal alien from everything and change it to non-citizen, which is why my presentation still is outdated now because it says non-citizen. And then I don't know, like 2 months ago, they came out and said, we're making everything change back to illegal alien. So just know that non-US or non-citizen legal alien are now interchangeable because the USCIS is going back to the term illegal alien. And then international document dates are entered incorrectly. We know that US likes to make up their own rules when it comes to dates and measurements. So you need to make sure if it's an international date on a passport that you're formatting it correctly. But all of that to say, I'm actually going to give myself a break, hand it over to Rachel, who's going to talk to y'all. And Rachel, just tell me when to change slides for you. Talk to y'all about international.
Thanks, Megan. So I know a lot of people probably haven't met me outside of my probably annoying emails that you all get back from me. So instead of coming off as like a negative outcome and me, because I feel like I reach out where I'm like, hey, this is wrong, I just want to give you guys quick little insight to kind of like what I do, and let you kind of know like 3 little things about me just to kind of set a good tone. So like Megan said, I'm Rachel. I do all of the I-9s for internationals and domestics, for Anschutz in Denver. So I do all the processing and check everyone's work, which is usually where you might hear back from me often. My second fact, like Megan said, my baby is my Great Dane. He's over here taking his midday nap. So, Doc, come here. In case people want to see, come here. Come on. He's very lazy. Maybe not. Anyways, third one would be, I'm really big into fitness and health. And I'm currently getting my personal certification, personal training certification. So just for fun, because that's just stuff that I enjoy. So international I-9s. So with the internal audit that we've kind of ran, and then just throughout my last almost 2 years in the position, I really like to kind of make things as clean as possible and try and clean up processes to be as easy for you, and for me to just kind of let things flow. So part of that today is going to be the presentation. We're just going to go through the main visas that we see. I know there's a lot of instances that can come up. I'm not a professional by any means, but usually I'll talk to ISS, or Franny is my daily questionnaire person. So for today, we're just going to go through the EADs, the F1s, the J1, and the H1B, kind of what that looks like in a Section 2 properly. Previously, I still don't mind, of course, doing corrections that are minor here and there, but with the information that we've received and kind of things that we've taken in with data wise, I'm going to be a little bit more sticky and kind of sending things back with a good amount of information as to like, hey, here's what we need, here's what I need from you, step-by-step processes. A lot of you may probably have seen this presentation before, but I just want to make sure that we can really try to nail this down. All right, thanks. Go ahead, Megan. So for the first one that we'll usually see, this is an employment authorization document. It's always going to be an EAD, and it will always be red. The thing with these is your employee will come to you, and after they fill out Section 1, they should mark number 4, an alien authorized to work. So number 4 in their status and highlight. And so this is a person who is not a citizen of the United States or a lawful permanent resident but are authorized to work in the United States. So we will talk about PRs later, but this will be one that you see a lot. So when you go in, you're completing Section 2, the first thing you're going to want to see is you're going to choose List A. It's an I-766 EAD, or Employment Authorization Card with photo. There is only in List A will you see the with photo, so that's really important that you choose that one. And then you'll see the document number next on the highlight prompts. So this will be shown right in that middle of that first document number here. Yep, thank you. And you can find this on the front of the card, usually on that mid right side here, or if it's not there, you'll always find it on the back. It'll always start with 3 letters, MSC, IOE. I think there's one that starts with an F. If you are not sure, HireRight does have a little drop down that'll show you a few different examples of what you would be looking for. So it'll say like the first 3 letters that are eligible on EAD cards. HireRight has a whole drop down to show you. But in general, if you saw it on the front, you'll find it on the back right before the very end or the last half of it. So you'll add in the document number and then the expiration date on the very bottom. So it says expiration date. The important things with these, they're usually added in correctly. Our main inconsistencies with these is in Section 1, which neither you nor none of us can touch Section 1. So we want to remind the employee that when they fill out number 4 and they put in the authorized work until, that expiration date has to be the same. as the expiration date that you're putting in. So this example, 10/26/24. And then I usually like to ask, just for consistency, if they're using an EAD, that they put in their USCIS number, just because then I can verify that that's there. It doesn't mean that if they use an I-94 or foreign passports that it's wrong. But then I usually will like to ask for the passport or the I-94 because I want to verify that those numbers are correct. So there's nothing wrong if they choose something else different, but if they do, then I would just suggest that we kind of get that second form of documentation in there, and that supporting document. And it looks good to me. Next one, please. So F1, this is usually that, again, the I-20s, STEM, OPT, stuff like that. So what we start off with is you always have 3 main documents you need to get for the F1, J1, H1B, those 3 months. You always have to have the 3 documents: foreign passport, I-94, and or your third document. So for the F1, this will be your I-20. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to go into option A or list A, and you'll choose foreign passport, work authorized non-immigrant. Excuse me. And then in here is where you're going to take that foreign passport that the employee has. You're going to put in their issuing authority is the country that the passport's from. So in our example, from China. And then the document number will be our typical document number in that right-hand corner. From there, you'll put in the expiration date like normal. It's good to note, if you hear anything about foreign passports, please note that the month and the day are always switched. Every foreign passport's the same way. They do not do American dates. They will always be switched. So usually they'll have the day and then the month like MAR or FEB. Sometimes they just have numbers. So if it's like 7 or 26/7/25 for an expiration date, you'll flip the first two. If the numbers are the same, that's okay, but just keep that in mind. And then you'll put in higher rate. We'll show you a prompt on the left-hand side in gray that says I-94 information. So you'll put in your document titles, your most recent I-94. I-94, I don't really care as long as it has the word or the letters I and the numbers N4. I don't really, not particular about how else we put it in. And then you're going to put in the issuing authority. And this is always found in the big bold letters up top, U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Again, uppercase, lowercase, periods, like I'm not going to be that scrutinizing of your work as long as it has the issuing authority there. Then you'll use the document number. This is always going to be usually about the first line in there. That's usually always correct. I never have a problem. I very rarely have a problem with those ones. And then your expiration date. So some I-94s will have a D/S, duration of status or duration of stay, and that's okay. So you usually will just put NA. If they have an expiration date, though, you still need to use the expiration date that the I-94 shows. But that doesn't mean that's the expiration date we will always use, and I'll kind of get into that nitty-gritty detail here in a little bit. So if there is one, we still have to put it. If there's not one, then just higher right just updated it and they have a DS check mark box that you can use. And then you'll move on to the next one. So usually here is where I have to send back I-9s because most BPs assume that this is just the end of it. We still have the F1 or the I-20 to put in. So at the bottom of your section 2 page, most of you will select no, that this is not work authorization. It is. So you're going to select yes from now on. And then from here on out, higher rate will show you a next drop down. It'll say each prompt goes through each line. It'll say, is this a I-20, a DS 2019, a 797? And you're going to put, this is an I-20. So that'll be your document title. And then your issuing authority, again, is in that top left-hand corner, Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Immigration Customs. There's no wrong answer. You can just put DHS, and that works too. And then you're going to put the document number. So it'll be the CVIS number just right after that. It usually always starts with an N00 or 00. And then you just put in those numbers. And again, HireRight shows you that prompt. It'll say document number, and it'll have a small example underneath of like, this is the CVIS number. So that's where you'll put that in. Then you'll move to the expiration date. And for the F1s, we will always use the page 1 program start and end dates. We will always use the end date for this expiration date. And that's the expiration date I use to track all of our F1s. So we will always use that one. And then same thing, when the employee goes into section 1, since you or I can do anything in section 1, it's just good to point out to the employee of like, hey, this is the expiration date you're going to use. It's 5/31/21 for the example for this one. And they have to match. So your I-20 expiration date has to match the section 1 date. And then again, in section 1, they can put foreign passport I-94 CIS number if they have it. There's no wrong answer there. And then kind of like a little kiosk thing here is highlighted in green. It says program sponsor. Most of the time we have to be the program sponsor. So it'll be CU Anschutz, CU Denver. Again, there are cases here and there where there's a different program sponsor, but those are case by case. But usually we want to make sure that we are listed there. All right, Megan, thank you. J1s, so again, the same thing. 3 things you have to have: passport, I-94, DS 2019. So you'll put in the foreign passport stuff, all of the same. It's always going to be in list A, foreign passport, work authorized non-immigrant. You'll put in the name of the country, the ID number, and the expiration date with the day and the month switched. And then the second one, you'll have your I-94 information, the ID number, and expiration date if there is one. And then for the DS 2019, it'll be the same thing. HireRight, like I said, they have you, if you read through the little script, it walks you through every part. So you'll put DS 2019 first. Issuing authority is a U.S. Department of State. They're labeled up at the top. And then you have your document number, which is on the far right side, right above the J1. And so that's the document number you're always going to use. And then the DS 2019, we'll use the expiration date that's on the left-hand side, about mid-page. It usually says end date. So same thing, we want to have the end date match up with the same end date in section 1. Okay. H-1Bs. So this is the only one where we can kind of have, we have a few different scenarios here, but for the most part, it'll be the same thing. Most of the time you'll have a 797A, and the 797A always comes with I-94 information at the bottom left-hand corner. I know it's kind of hard to see in the presentation. I guess I should have made that bigger, so it's noted for next time for me. But you'll have the information there. It has in bold I-94, and then you'll use the I-94 number, and then it has a separate expiration date, like 2 lines below it, and you can kind of see in the second pointer there. And so that is the expiration date you're going to use for the I-94 only, because those are the 2 that are cohesive with each other. When you go in to the next one, so you'll select yes, and then you'll go put in 797A, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services as the issuing authority. You'll put in the document number. This document number can be found in 2 places. If you want to make it easy, I highlighted top left. That's usually where you're going to find it. And there you can also find it right on top of the I-94 number. So it's up to you. I would just make sure that you're putting in the correct information. And then your expiration date for the 797A is going to be in that box on the right-hand side. That is the expiration date that we are going to use for my tracking purposes for Section 1 purposes. And then for you and the employee, if you all keep track of that, which you don't have to because I do. So that's just important. We get these all are cohesive. So the other thing with most of the H-1Bs, sometimes you'll have a 797B. With the Bs, they don't have the I-94 already on there, so you'd have to get that separate document to make sure they go together. Small other things that come with 797s is you'll have porting, you can have receipts that sometimes come in, but a 797C, unless they are porting, is not eligible for hire. That just means that they have the receipt, they applied for the visa, but they have not been approved yet. So unless they are porting, we cannot use a 797C for hiring purposes. Okay, next one, please. So international I-9s with no social security numbers, they're totally okay. When the employee goes into there, they can mark in hire right that they do not have an I-9 or a social security number. And they'll just verify that. That sends usually an automatic email to me once the I-9 is completed. And then I keep track of those, and you'll see my emails that go out that say, hey, it's your responsibility to make sure that you apply for Social Security card and let me know when you get the number. We do not have a strict time period on this. Franny and I have talked about it, but usually I really try to be on top of these, and it's been pretty rare that we've had employees terminate without ever adding one. But we just ask that you try to keep track of that too, because it is important. But there's no strict time period or rate or time that they have to have it, because it's not really up to us as to when they get it. So, but when they do, just let me know, or you can send the I-9 back to the employee and they just add it, and then I'll run it through E-Verify from there. But most of the time I'll just take care of it because it's easier. Yeah, those are social security numbers, so we can get those later. And then I think I only had just a few more little notes, just like two. One of my few notes here that we kind of put down is kind of like
hang on a second, we're doing trivia time.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, wait, can you still see my screen?
Yeah, you can. I was just reading my notes.
Sorry.
There was no music, so we got confused, Megan. There was no music,
There's no
so,
music. So true or false, when a visa or EAD is renewed, you should correct the I-9. This is a trick question, y'all.
This is.
Oh, look, all the answers are changing. I love it. Let's see. Okay, we'll see where we're at. So we're about 50-50. Rachel, do you want to explain? Do we correct the I-9?
No, we don't. If you get renewed visas or DS 2019s or I-20s, any renewed documentation you just send to me. Because the thing is, when you correct the I-9, you are redoing the whole original thing. You're not renewing the I-9, you're correcting the entire thing, and voiding out any previous documentation. And well, I can redo them, but what you would do, anything, is just send them to me. ISS is really good at sending them out most of the time. Usually if I don't receive them, then you'll get my emails of like, hey, this person's work authorization is expiring. Do you have any updated information? So I will usually reach out to you, but yes, like Megan said, the only time that I will actually have you guys touch a Section 3 is if the employee is rehiring and I gave you the okay. Because I need to check that they are actually rehiring and they're not in a different department, or is their I-9 actually expired or not. And you guys can't see that because only I can see it on HireRight. And then I will let you know. And then if they do have an I-9 that's still good, I will let you know. But that's the only section 3s I will ever have you fill out. Any re-verifications or name changes, you just go through me for. But yes, please, you though, only make corrections if I send it back to you for corrections. Yes, updated all renew and expiration dates over section 1 we went over. Please make sure all of your documents are combined into one PDF because we are charged per upload by HireRight, and it's important to me that I don't have to tell Megan or Adrian that we're excessively paying for things. So you can just use your Adobe, put it all in one PDF, and then re-upload from there. And usually I'll send you an email and kind of remind you. If it's once for like a BC document, it's a one-time thing, I don't mind. But if it becomes repetitive, then I'll have you go back and change it. But for all internationals, because we do have 3 separate documents usually, I will usually have you go back and put it into one PDF. Any acceptable documents. So one of the things is Social Security cards. This is important. Social Security cards can only be used for I-9s if they don't have writing on it. It can only be the name and the Social Security number. They cannot have writing on it that says like work authorized, etc. This shows you page 2 on the I-9. It gives you all the examples of what that writing looks like. But it has to be a clean Social Security card if we are going to use it in a BC list form, which usually we don't have that for internationals, but for domestics, that's okay. But just so you know, like for internationals, if they already have their Social Security card, that's great. But if it is not a clean card, we cannot use it for a BC document. Duplicate I-9s and E-Verify. I think Megan went over those pretty quickly and well. Names. So we will have issues with names with internationals for a lot of different situations, but mainly we want to make sure that the employee is putting their name down exactly as it's shown on the Social Security card if they have one already, just because once the I-9 gets ran through E-Verify, if it's not put in exactly the same, they're going to get kicked back into a tentative non-confirmation. And then we have to go through that whole process. And it is painful for every party involved. So if there's any issues with names, if they have the Social Security card, we want to follow it. We need to have the legal name exactly as it is. If they have multiple names, we have to put it as properly as possible. Again, sometimes it's not bulletproof, and we just have to go the way we go, and that's okay. Sometimes employees don't have a last name, and that's okay. We will use what does it fill in? I think it fills in with unknown or something like that, but that's okay. We'll work from there. But as long as you can, as closely as legal possible. Same thing with HCM is like, yes, you can use a spot for preferred name, but I cannot find people in HCM if you're not using their legal names there too. So they have to be the same. Perfect. And those were all my notes. Oh, the only one I didn't go over, the difference between an EAD and a green card. EADs are red, green cards are green. Green cards are for permanent residents, EADs are for non-immigrants. So pretty simple. EAD number 4, permanent resident number 3. Any questions on that, you can go through the USCIS website, and they show you all kinds of examples for each acceptable supporting document. So if you have questions about that, USCIS is great. If not, you can always ask me, but usually I'll point you there too. So yeah, just lots of changes, lots of good stuff. But if my main goal this year would be to really try and get us all to nail down internationals. So
thank you, Rachel. And Rachel's main contact, the HR I-9 inbox, is on the screen. So that is a great place to send any questions if you have I-9's like everything else is, you know, please feel free to bother us and ask, because we recognize that, especially right now, there's just a lot of things going on around these spaces. And we're here to try to help with that if you need it. So, and we're nearing the end. I promise I'm not going to drone on about a whole bunch of stuff, but I do have a couple more slides that I'm calling 5 things to know about. So that we're going to go through these real quick, and it's going to just be 3 slides, 5 things on each slide. But I think I have one last question. So let's see what our last trivia question is, because quite frankly, I forgot. Where is it? Where is it? Not that one. Oh, there we go. Oh, it's a great one. Okay. Last question. True or false? A candidate can be hired into position if they don't meet the minimum requirements. Please don't break my heart on this, people. Yes. 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 Look at this beauty. 100%. I love it. 100% of you said that is false. But yet, we have this conversation almost daily, y'all. So here's the first area. Top 5 things to know about faculty, right? And faculty hiring is tricky because you got Ryan and Cheryl, you got HR ops. We're all doing different parts of the process, but these I think kind of apply across the board. So departments are responsible for running a defensible search process, and candidates must meet all minimum qualifications. I don't know how else to say this. If it is posted that it needs an MD and the person is a nurse, they do not meet the minimum qualifications. If it says that it requires a bachelor's degree in health education and they work at Sally Beauty Supply and have no bachelor's degree, they do not meet the minimum qualifications. These are real examples, y'all. So I understand that search committees are off doing things and hiring managers sometimes go rogue and they know the most perfect person, but we have to figure out a way to make sure that the person meets the minimum qualifications. And I'm not talking about the ones where it's like hard to tell if they have the experience or stuff. We just see it where literally they do not meet the qualifications. There is no such thing as an indefinite posting. I know that it used to be a practice that you could put a posting up and leave it forever. We don't live in that world anymore. The Colorado Equal Pay for Equal Work Act states that an employer must make a good faith estimate of the date an application window is anticipated to close. Affirmative action, while is a little bit different than it used to look. We're still tracking these things. And it also used to say that you have to close it out once a year so that we can do good data tracking. And while we may necessarily aren't following affirmative action right now because we're not supposed to, in terms of the reporting part, it doesn't mean that we don't want good data practices. So job postings should never stay up forever. They have to close eventually. Now, can you close it, disposition your candidates, and open a new one right back up just like it? Absolutely. Is it that, you know, it's a chair and it's going to take more than a year? We get that. We're not going to hound you about that. But I have actually had business partners recently say, oh no, this is an indefinite posting. There is no such thing in any hiring world of an indefinite posting. And quite frankly, it doesn't do justice to the department because you start getting pulled out of the feeds and you start getting pulled out of the places candidates are looking for jobs. And then you have candidates sitting there forever. So it really is a good practice to make sure, well, and Colorado Equal Pay for Equal Work Act requires it, that there is an end to a posting. All postings should have a search summary or search matrix so that we can close it out. This goes back to number 1. We have to show that we had a defensible search. This is another one. I don't know why this is a problem. Candidates have to actually apply for the job they're trying to get. Like we in the faculty world, they don't want to apply for jobs like that. I thought that was like a standard thing all adults knew, but then they come back and they're like offended because we're asking them to apply for a job. So just know that like this is a process thing we can't avoid. They got to apply for the job. It's not that we're trying to make it hard on you, and it's not that we're trying to like insult that person because they think they don't have to apply for something, but like that's just the process. And then the last thing is just more of a great tip. Postings should use the most current templates available. So we're constantly updating the job ad posting templates. They just got updated again with some like revision to the EEOC language. And usually my team is going back and updating. When you submit something using an outdated posting, we're just going in and updating it for you or going back and updating it. So just always make sure Exactly. Even Beyonce had to audition to be Tiana. Come on, y'all. Love it. Was that to everybody or just to me? I hope that was to everybody and I'm not being nuts. Okay, it was to everybody. Cool. You saw it. All right. So just know that like it's good to go out and check that you have the most current posting if you're doing a job ad. Okay, top 5 things to know about temps. Everything I just said about faculty also pretty much applies to temps, but temps have some different things. So number 1, and you all have sat through this presentation, so you know this. This is a refresher. Temps can work more than an average of 30, temps that work more than an average of 30 hours in a rolling 12-month period can only work for 9 months and must take a 4-month break from all CU employment. CU is a single employer, which means a temp cannot work on our campus and then go work on another campus and not do the 4-month break. They have to take that break, period. Temps that work less than an average of 30 hours in a rolling 12-month period and less than a total of 1,560 hours can work for 12 months, but then they have to take a 6-month break. These are not CU rules. This is Affordable Care Act driven. This is what we have to do to ensure that as a university, we are doing what we need to do under the Affordable Care Act. So those are kind of our regulations on temps. We're always able to help you figure out what a temp can work. Students should use the student job code. This isn't, I mean, we don't employ like student assistants in the way that maybe other campuses necessarily do or at the level that they do, but like we do get a lot of questions about putting STEM students in temp job codes. If it makes sense, is where they should be. It would be a very rare circumstance to hire a student as a temp. That is an excellent question, Angela. No, temp agencies are considered a procurement process. And so they are not under the same hours requirements because we are procuring through a contract that labor through them. So they don't fall under the ACA. So that's an excellent question. These are just temps we're employing. What about non-CU students? That's also an excellent question. We have a job code for non-CU students. If they are actively registered at a university, and they're coming here with some respect related to their student role necessarily. So the way I like to phrase it as is that what is the primary relationship with the person? Is the person a student first and then getting a job here because of their relationship as a student somewhere? Then they really should go into that student job code. Versus like me, I'm an employee first. I also happen to be a graduate student somewhere. Now I'm not getting a job as a graduate student there, but my primary relationship is as an employee, even though I'm a student at a CU institution. So it's really looking at that, but there is a code for non-CU students. Now I know one of the departments had like a really weird research situation with like a private medical school, which honestly, I didn't even know Denver had a private medical school and I didn't even know private medical schools exist. So that was like an eye opener, but like we put those in different job codes because it was a kind of a different nuanced situation. But in general, if they are enrolled somewhere, they should be in a student job code. Part of that's just because of how students are coded in terms of benefits and hours and all of those things. An employee cannot be more than 1 FTE. So a full-time employee cannot also work somewhere as a temp. And when we start talking about overtime eligibility, that really gets complicated. So just know that in general, like, I don't even want the job I have. Let's all just have one job, people. Like if you're a full-time employee, don't be going out and getting other jobs on campus. You can have just one job. It's okay. And then temporary appointments are set up as biweekly hourly. As a result, they are all FLSA non-exempt and overtime eligible, which also gets complicated when there's a full-time employee that's monthly salaried, maybe non-exempt, and then trying to work as a biweekly hourly temp. So be cautious of people with multiple appointments because it can get real tricky. And then they can have multiple temp appointments, but then you have to look at the hours calculation because remember, we're a single employer. All right, I'm going so fast. I have one slide left. Top 5 things to know about retirees. Working CU retirees are intended to be temporary. It's a little bit more complicated here on the Anschutz campus because of the clinical faculty side, right? Like they still have their patients. So it's going to be a little more than just a couple of months, but in general, they're meant to be temporary. Faculty retiring from CU should use the 1620, 1621 job code. However, if you feel like that job code won't work for you, please talk to myself or Franny because there are some pay situations that we found those job codes to be complicated for, and we'll try to help you sort that out. Staff retirees are always paid biweekly. Faculty retirees can be set up in those job codes as biweekly, monthly, or contracts. So they can be any of those things. Para retirees can work a maximum of 110 days or 720 hours. We know that that's not a direct calculation. You have to go to their website and they explain why. But they're responsible for tracking. They're also responsible for letting us know that they're para retirees, which if they retired with para at the university, that's easy. But we've had people who have retired at para outside the university. So maybe from a state agency or from a K-12. And then we actually had a situation where they didn't tell the employer they were a para retiree and took a full-time staff job. And at 110 days, I got all these emails from chairs and PIs begging me to extend this person. And I have no control over this. This is a para rule. So it is really on the retiree to know this. And trust me, they know this. They get so much information from para. So there's that piece too. And then the last thing that we get questions on with faculty retirees is that if it's one of our retirees, so if they are a ORP, so a non-para or a faculty retiree in a faculty retiree job code or any retiree job code, there's no limit on the number of hours they can work. They don't have to be 0.49 FTE. But if you are putting a faculty or staff retiree into a non-retiree job code, which you shouldn't be doing, but if you are, then they would be limited to the 0.49 hours because they cannot be benefits eligible because it would mess up their retirement benefits. So just be mindful that the job code matters. And retirees are ultimately responsible for their distribution impacts. So if they do take a working retiree job and there's going to be impacts to their distributions, that's for them to work out with whoever their retirement provider is. That's it. Look at this. I got 7 minutes left. Any questions? If you stay on, Deanna's going to sing. I think I answered all the questions in here. Yeah, I'm good. We're good.
Thank you all for your work on the internal audit. We appreciate it. We've seen a lot of progress so far. So thank you guys for that.
Yes, I agree.
All right, if there are no final questions for Megan or Rachel, we'll cut you loose. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great afternoon.